I think now we are on. Welcome to Virtual Happy Hour 3.0, another highlight of the week. We are going to get some very big secrets from Iceland, one of the most important islands on Earth. Aina, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, for the grand introduction. This is actually been a very fun project. I really enjoy it because usually you do not think of your own country in such terms, but I'm going to try to keep this in another direction to the tourist brochure. So I'm going to try to dabble into what makes the social core or the national identity of us Icelanders, and I'll just start with myself as the first representative. And I'm your host for today's session of Virtual Happy Hour 3.0. I'm the founder and principal consultant of A3 Aviation Consulting. I was born in Siglufjörður, which is up north on the northern coast of Iceland. So it's a tiny town, but it has a very important place in Icelandic history. And it is kind of referred to as Aspen of Iceland or Verbier in Switzerland or something like that because of ample skiing opportunities, outdoor opportunities. So a lot of heli skiing outfits are being operated in the town or around it. I majored in decision engineering, a hybrid of applied mathematics and computer science. I was 7 years at Icelandair operations, first working for VP Flight Ops, then directly for the COO. And I predominantly spend my time away from the computer doing outdoor activities, sports, hunting, and just playing around with the family. And today I provide domain knowledge and expertise in operational excellence, fleet planning, and system and IT architecture for airlines and vendors in the aerospace industry. But let's dive in and let's go into the macro features of Iceland. And I'm like, again, I had a huge blast about doing this presentation. So the skinny on Iceland is that from our background is that we are a nation of Old North Germanic languages, and it is the closest language to what the Vikings spoke. So often when we look at TV shows like Vikings or in any movies, when people are trying to imitate what the Vikings spoke, they use poor imitations of Icelandic. Some do better than others, i.e. the imitations. So we sit on top of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. So we are figuratively and in exact terms, the bridge between Europe and North America, as we sit atop of the North Atlantic Ridge. So part of the Icelandic landmass is actually in North America. And we have currently 3 World UNESCO Heritage Sites. The capital, obviously, is Reykjavik, and Icelandair often uses the trick to market Keflavik International as Reykjavik, but in reality, you are going to drive 40 minutes from the airport instead of arriving directly into Reykjavik. And for the graphs here, I decided just to show the flag, the country map, and the age demographic. So we have one of the highest life expectancies in the world, and we are around 360,000, and around that is 15% immigrants, but in reality it's 100% because Iceland is a nation of immigrants. People sometimes forget that, but in reality, in the beginning, when the country was settled, it was Norwegian refugees and also slaves brought from Europe, especially northern Great Britain, Ireland, and other parts of the coastline of Northern Europe. So when you look at the genome of Icelanders, we are almost 50-50 Germanic and Celtic. And we often have saying that we took all the beautiful women as slaves from the UK. But let's leave it at that. And we also rank, and recently we are at the top of most of global indexes when it comes to standard of living or sustainability or happiness. But we've come a very long way in a short time, because at the beginning of the 20th century, Iceland was probably one of the poorest countries in Europe due to numerous reasons. I also added a picture here which just shows you how Icelandic scenery and also the twilight is. So I shot the lower right picture just with my iPhone, no filters or anything. And photographers often refer to Iceland as having the golden twilight because it lasts for hours and hours.
And I remember I was in Iceland 2004, and the average centigrade is 6 degrees roundabout annually.
Yeah, it's correct. That's due to the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream actually makes it so that the sea around the island is way warmer than it should be compared to the latitude. So in January, we are experiencing similar temperatures to New York. But because of the maritime environment, it doesn't get that hot necessarily during the summer. But here we have the timeline of Iceland, the epics. I just kept the real important ones, like when the country was settled first by Ingólfur Arnarson back in 872. Founding of Alþingi, which was the first parliament in the world. It is at Þingvellir, which is our World UNESCO Heritage Site, and the name just implies Parliament grounds. So if you see the little houses here, this is where the old Parliament grounds were. And then we get to the next milestone on the timeline, which is 1264. That's the Old Covenant. That's when we decided to get back in union with Norway. But then we got from Norway back into the Danish Empire. And a lot of centuries then are lost due to that. No, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but very little did happen during Danish rule. And they didn't help us in many regards. So us Icelanders are very split in our views towards the Danish. Some of us are, you could even, classify them as royalists, but others do not think very fondly of the Danes. But then in 1918, we got self-governance, and but we finally, but probably not our finest hour, we decided during 1944 to declare full independence, and that was during the occupation of Denmark by Germany. So we've been an independent country since 17th of June 1944, and then the closest real victory that we had is obviously 2018 in the getting access to the World Cup. We are the smallest nation ever to qualify for the FIFA World Cup in football. The second smallest nation was Trinidad and Tobago. We are 350,000, 360,000. They were 1.2 million. But there's also another feat that I forgot, and that's in 2016 when we made the Euros and we went into the final 8. And when the French beat us in the Euros in football, that during 2016, we were one of, I think, 5 countries in Europe Germany, Spain, France, and Croatia to have men's national teams representing the country in the Euros in football, Euros in handball, and Euros in basketball. So we made it to the finals in the three major ball sports in 2016, which isn't bad for a country of 360,000.
But you have a very unique kind of cheering. Maybe you can do this for all the people who like to remember this.
You mean
who? Exactly.
Yeah.
That was awesome always after the game to see this. And I was also impressed about the sportsmanship and the spectators. And so I think it was also a very sympathetic team, the way of playing this so fresh football. So I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, and please jump in with questions at any time. I want to keep this as interactive as possible.
By the way, today we have a big premiere because we have two benefiters of this crisis. You know which country is benefiting from this COVID-19?
Portugal.
It's Portugal because
Portugal is still European champions.
Yeah, exactly, and probably
China.
Scandal
in life that they have won. Go. What's this strange player, Carlos? I don't remember his name.
I tell you know all the names. All the 11 names.
What's his name? Roncalli?
No, you are so smart. You don't forget that. Sorry.
So we have two Portuguese who are now listening to the winner of the hearts of the European champion.
And you don't forget, we are the only team. We are 5 years champion, European champion. 5 years. Don't forget that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Without playing.
No. We're still there.
Let's enjoy while it lasts.
Yeah.
Kudos to you guys.
Yeah.
COVID-19, or how we went through COVID-19 in Iceland. Sometimes it is an advantage living in an island, and also having a small population, but it's also down to our thinking and our philosophy. We often have this term in Icelandic, which is "þetta reddast." And this is very engraved in our national soul. It's like everything will work out in the end. We don't know how, but we know it will. And I mean, so it's kind of like a merry-go-lucky attitude to life. But in all honesty, though, I'm pulling the Mickey here because we had a very measured and very thorough response by our government organizational apparatus, both from the health perspective and also from police, infrastructure, from the parliament. So we had a very thought out plan to tackle, and we started similar to Germany and other countries where the epidemic has proved to being contained relatively efficiently, that we started preparations well in advance, and Iceland in earnest started the preparations in early January. But there were obviously some interesting and very funny aspects and how it changed our lives a bit. I mean, we never went into proper lockdown. I mean, my biggest take from COVID was that I was forced to work way more during evenings and nights because schools were only run on 50% capacity, so kids only went every other day to school at kindergarten level and in grammar school. But what we were up to during COVID was predominantly, well, pregnancy test purchasing went up 10%. Alcohol purchasing went up a whopping 28%. But I can also testify that my wife, she probably accounts for a big portion of that pastry supply purchasing went up 70% during COVID. And I mean, that was a global phenomenon, but there is this thing in the Icelandic mentality that we always have to catch every trend and we have to do it better than anyone else. So the Icelandic nation just went crazy in pastry making and baking and cooking. And but we then, when it comes to the alcohol purchasing, we it was kind of sad in a little way because we have only government alcohol stores called Vinbúðin. That's the picture on the bottom left. And due to social distancing, you could see huge lines starting outside of those liquor stores due to the social distancing. So they had to be 2 meters apart from everyone. Well, yeah, 2 meter spacing. So there would be lines that were like even, I think, more than 100 meters or 150 meters long just to go into buy a pack of beer. But in all honesty, we got off very lightly during COVID, and we had 10 deaths, and we often just watched the news and felt sorry and had huge sympathy towards the rest of the nations that were not faring as well. And I mean, we still see the epidemic on the rise in North America. But it is what it is.
I think it was also, Iceland is one of the first victims of this Austrian Ischgl ski resort.
Yeah.
Plenty of the Icelanders were skiing there, bringing it back to Iceland. Iceland was reporting this then, and then I think the Austrian authorities were kind of ignoring it, and they supported the wider spread in Europe. And then it was brought to Norway, Germany, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Denmark, Sweden. So or the government of Tyrol, Austria, they ignored notifications and information from first Iceland, then Norway and Denmark. I mean, that was obviously due to them protecting their tourism industry. They're so hugely reliant on tourist income in Tyrol from the winter ski season. But I think that we can be proud in Iceland due to our vigorous testing and tracing strategies, and we also have a very influential and also a trailblazing company in genetic research called Decode, and they went full force into cooperation with the government in the tracing strategies and the testing. So we can see a very beautiful graph here in the down right corner of how active infections correlated with the ones that recovered. And I mean, I think we can, in all honesty, stand up and do a round of applause for our government apparatus and Decode for this. But I know this has been a very prominent feature in the virtual happy hour sessions when we're discussing national cuisines. As the country was also very poor before the beginning of the 20th century, and this is in the top of the past, and it was obviously heavily reliant on the ingredients that we had. But what was also lacking was culinary skills. So we didn't have proper culinary skills in the country. So our cooks were just plain bad. But on the far left, and we have a traditional þorramadr. So this is the famous ram's head or the sheep's head. This is the fermented shark. This is smoked meat. This is rye bread, hummus traditionally baked with geothermal energy or geothermal heat. And this is traditionally eaten now during Þorri, which in the old Norse calendar was the last last winter months before spring. So this was the time of the year when people in Iceland were essentially starving, because braving the elements back in the day in Iceland was a monumental task. So during this time of the year, people were really struggling. And to preserve food, obviously, food was either heavily salted, it was dried, it was fermented, or it was thrown or soured. So soured ram's testicles. This is still eaten as a traditional food during Þorri. And we have a thing called Þorrablót, which is very popular in late January to early March. And that's basically an excuse for us Icelanders to gather and eat, drink, feast like the Vikings of the old past, and yeah, sing patriotic songs. But usually, it's an excuse to go on a binge drinking, which we are rather good at. But then, second from the left is plokkfiskur, which is basically a fish stew, traditionally made from fillets of haddock or cod, and this is with onions, shallot onions, potatoes, and often with cheese grated over the top. And this is a traditional, like a Monday lunch, and this can be either horrible, but when your mom does this is brilliant. This is like one of our comfort foods. And when it's done properly, it is a very good dish. But probably, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask. That's pretty interesting. Do you have a favorite in here, and do you make one of these yourself?
So I'm not the average Icelander, because I grew up north, and because pull and push influences on economies. So majority of Icelanders are urban. But my family still lives up north, and we have a hobby sheep farm, and I do a lot of hunting, and I'm an enthusiastic cook, so I pretty much eat all of this. But I eat the traditional þorramat during the season of Þorri, and they go to Þorrablót. We don't have the top left. Apart from rye bread and occasionally, shark with brennivin, which is a native spirit. If the shark is done pretty properly, it is very good, actually. But the thing that I probably do enjoy the most of the traditional foods are the three ones to the right. So plokkfiskur, but the meat stew, which is a lamb stew, which you cook for a long time, and that's one of our comfort food, soul foods, packs a real punch. And I could have that for Christmas Eve. It is very, very good. It's Icelandic lamb with onions, carrots, white cabbage often, and then you have a bunch of other spices thrown into it. And sometimes people add potatoes, but I traditionally don't do that. So that is also a very, very good dish. So we actually produce our lamb, and in a lot of cases, Icelandic lamb and New Zealand lamb is ranked as the best lamb in the world. I haven't tried New Zealand lamb, but I've always been anxious to try it and how it stacks up against ours, because our lamb is free range. So they're born in the spring, and then we just open the gates and they roam up into the mountains or into the highlands. So it's pretty much almost like game, and we round them up during autumn. So they're not in contact with civilization during the summer months. But
so last year when I was in Iceland in 2004, I've eaten whale, and 2004 I've eaten also reindeer. That's not in your list. Is it because in certain countries whale is politically incorrect perceived? Or is it because you don't like whale, or is it not on the kitchen menu anymore?
So yes and no. It's kind of weird how things often change. Like what was considered posh like 60, 70 years ago was like for Christmas to have like Danish ham. So that was posh because we didn't produce pork. So the poor people, they actually went out and hunted game like ptarmigan or often known in Scotland as grouse. But now that's completely reversed. The poor people, they go for Danish ham, but whilst the new posh and in vogue Christmas dinners are game like grouse, goose, duck, caribou, reindeer, sorry. And whale, some not for Christmas dinner, but whale is back in fashion, and I really like whale. It has a certain texture to it and a certain flavor, but it has to be done right. Whale is exactly like, for example, reindeer, another game. As if you cook it more than medium rare, then you ruined it. So as long as you keep it on rare to medium rare, whale is brilliant, especially because we use, and this is a misconception because yes, we hunt whales, but we do so in, and like everything else we do in Iceland, we do that in a sustainable manner. And we only hunt minke whale, which we have in abundance in our territorial waters. And even the US, they hunt more whale than we do. So, so we always say that, I mean, it is a hypocrisy how we are labeled. But in hindsight, yeah, I should have kept whale here. I thought about it, but reindeer, I'm going reindeer hunting in in 4 weeks. So that's not traditional food, but of people who do hunting and people people in the countryside, they eat a lot of reindeer, and that was also kind of funny because now reindeer is considered very posh in Iceland. So you pay here in Reykjavik, if you go to a butcher and you want a kilo of, let's say, a good muscle of reindeer, you could pay up to 200 euros a kilo. Whilst 30, 40 years ago, people who were considered poor out east where the reindeers live, they wouldn't tell anyone that they were eating reindeer because that was considered, not a delicacy. But now, because we've adopted the culinary skills, we've become much more proficient in utilizing the natural ingredients that we have, which brings us to the new Nordic cuisine. And us in the travel industry, we travel a lot, and I often hear from people that come to Iceland and we go to proper restaurants, and when they see the ingredients now and the culinary skills that we have, they often say that this is the best meals they have are in Icelandic restaurants. Yes, they pay for it because of, number one, we are a very expensive country when it comes to labor and resources and infrastructure, but I think you get what you're paying for, especially when it comes to the meals themselves. But do not go for buying wine in Icelandic restaurants. That's just insane, the margin that they put on it.
Yeah.
So from the left in the new Nordic cuisine, or what we eat today, that's cured goose breast. I do that a lot with blueberry vinaigrette, which is. So you have the blueberries, the wild blueberries, whom the geese, it's what the geese and lamb and ducks they eat. So, and you have that with rucola, and this is very popular when I throw parties to have, and people, they love this, cured duck or cured even grouse. I've cured reindeer as well, lamb. And we also do hot smoking, and we also hunt a lot of seabirds. So like, unfortunately, we do hunt puffins, but there are other cousins of the puffins, seabirds like razorbill and can't remember. It's very common in Europe and North America as well. So Iceland is a land of abundance because it's such a big country with immense natural resources with a small population. You just have to know what to do and what to use with it. So the second from the left, that's leg of lamb. I do this probably once a month, and I play with. I do this often on the barbecue, so I fusion Icelandic ingredients with American barbecue. So I often smoke leg of lamb on the barbecue with mesquite wood from Texas, because it's spicy. Sometimes with hickory, and then you obviously have roasted potatoes, and sometimes we have it in a Dutch oven, and we add red wine to it to create the stock for sauce that we have with it. And second from right, obviously, I couldn't leave out all of our delicious seafood, which ranges from linguistine, all different kinds of fish like monkfish, haddock, cod, the list goes on and on, halibut. But then, last but not least, skyr, which is an Icelandic dairy product, and it's very, very pure when it's in its pure form. But unfortunately, this is often mixed with sugar. So you go to supermarkets and you can find skyr with all different kinds of flavor, to mango with added sugar and etc. But when it's in its purest form, it is a superfood. And as I stated in the top, this was a strongman's secret weapon, because when skyr is pure, like I usually eat it, it is just protein, no fat, very little carbohydrates, and it's very good for building muscle. But this is something that the Icelandic nation subsidized on for centuries. So, any questions? Anything that you have had in Iceland, or would like to have or try?
Well, we have pretty much this skaya in Germany, so we use it regularly also for our breakfast, my wife and me, and I enjoyed the food. So last year being there in Iceland, because that's what I like, always being in locations where you don't get the usual food, and that's not, let's say, everybody goes in an Italian restaurant, everybody goes in the French restaurant, but it's very rare that you have somewhere in the world an Icelandic restaurant. So I would say that's very rare, and that's why I like the cuisine very much.
And we almost forgot it. We also eat horse in Iceland, and I've had American guys coming over, obviously from aerospace companies, and we've gone to business dinners downtown Reykjavik, and sometimes I've ordered, and they all think it's beef, like super lean beef, and they're very amazed by it. And then I say, yeah, guys, that's horse. That's a horse fillet. Some are taken back by it, but others like, yeah, they really liked it.
That's why the football team was capable to run so much, huh?
Yeah, don't tell anyone though.
But you know that in Portugal, it was also not in the north, but also in Lisbon and surroundings. It was also a food that was consumed in Lisbon and surrounding, also horse meat. And it was very strange for the rest of the country, but it was something that was very usual. But we didn't run that much.
Yes.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Wow.
That's true. Well, I didn't know either, because I'm not from Lisbon originally. And when I heard that, and I said, what? I said the same.
I never listened to that.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to share a couple of your recipes. I live in Orlando, and I just did, looking at these pictures is making me hungry. So I looked up some local Icelandic restaurants in Orlando. And Orlando is kind of a melting pot, right? It's a very international city with tourists. There is not one Icelandic restaurant in the area that I can find. So I guess I'll have to make it myself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our cuisine hasn't made it out of the country yet, but we have actually some hamburger joints making inroads into other markets, but it is it very much revolves around using what we have around us, and I mean, but due to our geothermal energy, we've dabbled into. We produce most of our fruit, most of our vegetables already in country,
Right.
in greenhouses. We've started to produce most of our grain domestically, but it mostly goes to either pizzas or making beer. So we're going to have a good session on brewing later on in the call.
Nice.
But yeah, I really like Orlando. Iceland Air has operations there, and I visited Orlando a few times.
Good.
Yeah, but let's dive a little bit into our psyche. I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but I'm going to do my best, try to explain actually what's beneath the hood in the Icelandic nation, and let's start with the external macro influences. So during obviously the winter months, but also during summer, we love our hot pools. We love our swimming pools, and this is like at the core of the Icelandic rituals. I mean, my 8-month daughter today, she went her 3rd day in a row to one of our swimming pools. I mean, so we're kind of like the Japanese snow monkeys during winter. We like to hang out in our hot tubs, similar to the Finns when it comes to their saunas. And also big cultural phenomenon in Iceland is summer houses, or perhaps it's also in Norway where it's called hutta. In Iceland, it's just called sumarbústaður. And a summer house is not complete unless it has a hot tub. So our idea of a cozy weekend is a cozy retreat to a summer house with good food, like we were going over, and kicking back in the hot tubs and enjoying sceneries and letting the kids play. But the macro influencers and people often are very surprised that we are not very organized as Icelanders because of the elements. So when people were trying to survive here for 1,000 years, you were basically at the mercy of the elements. So making any planning, like planning when to sow in the springtime for crops, as in other developed countries, I mean, that was very difficult to do. So Icelanders are very used to times of inactivity, but then when the opportunities or the need occurs to work like crazy, and that's essentially how Iceland came from being one of the poorest nations in Europe to one of its richest in a span of 100 years in the 20th century, because of industrialization of our fishing industries and herring exports to countries like Portugal and Spain for salt fish, so they can make their bacalhau. So we are very inorganized. So similar to what Daniel said, I mean, we are the Latins of Scandinavia, like Berliners are the Latins of Germany. So the difference between, a good example is like if you say after work to a Swedish guy, you say to him, "Hey, should we go out for a beer or something?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm good, probably in week 38." But in Iceland, it was like, "Yeah, sure, let's go." I mean, we tend to just go with the flow of things, but things have changed a bit. I would say not for the worse, but we are just getting more synced with the international community. So we are getting there. But then it's the terrain. People often forget that Iceland is mountainous, and there are a lot of streams and rivers which are not nice during wintertime to cross. So there are different attitudes and like different philosophies when it comes to life, depending on the part of the country we're living. Like out east, they say we never use alarms. We only wake up when we are done with sleeping. So they have a very laid back attitude to life. But it makes it so that due to the difficulty of the terrain, that when you, like in the old Viking times, like when there was a wedding, it was a wedding for a week because people had probably had to travel for a week or 10 days to get to the wedding. So we are very, very good hosts. But then this can-do attitude that we have is also relative to the isolation. We had to be self-sufficient and self-reliant, and I really hope that we cling to that as much as possible. And this is, I would say, a very good plus factor to have as an attribute in the national identity. But then it's literature, the sagas. People had to do something during those long, dark winter nights, so they wrote literature or told stories, and that's how our language actually was kept intact. And that's why our language is so close to what the Vikings spoke, whilst Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish evolved through the centuries. And also due to the proximity to Germany and England. So that's why it's very easy for us to learn Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish, because we speak the root of the language, and our grammar is way more complicated, similar to German, but we always we predominantly have the verb in the middle of the sentence, whilst sometimes in German you have the end. But so we are blessed when it comes to learning and picking up at least Germanic languages like German, English, Scandinavian languages minus Finnish, but we are often likened to the Finns when it comes to our demonar. One Nobel Prize winner in literature, Halldór Laxness. Actually very good books, highly recommend them. But sometimes it has its ups and downs of being a small town, or like I stated here, it can be for better or worse. So it can be often very tribal from town to town, the rivalry. So, but usually we disagree on everything. But during COVID, we showed tremendous solidarity and respect to our fellow man, and that's one of the key reasons why we were so successful in clamping on COVID. But I promise to stay away from the tourist brochures. So I'm going to let you in a little secret called smáborgarháttur, or a direct translation with like small citizenship. And I don't know, I mean, if any of you are from a small town where everyone knows everyone, it kind of can be a double-edged sword, because in those small towns, everyone knows everyone. And it always goes into, and it drives people into, I have to have a better garden than the neighbor. I have to have a fancier car than the neighbor, or a newer snowmobile or whatnot. So it can drive people on to work, or do something very cool, like, or people just can cave from that social pressure. But I see here in Reykjavik, it is moving a little bit out of that, because the city is growing and you don't necessarily always know the people around you. But I'm curious, have you ever seen that in small towns, or if you're from a small town, to experience that?
I'm from Berlin. I think I cannot contribute. Big town.
I'm born in the north, in the small town, and I agree with you. Of course, it's different. It's different. Here in Lisbon, I live 30 years in Lisbon, but in my small town, Viseu, called Viseu, north of Portugal. It's like that.
Because I think this is one of the key reasons why Icelanders are very, very, very competitive in the core, because you are always trying to be better than your neighbor or your friend or your cousin, and because we live in such small communities, and
We feel the same in Portugal. We are a small country, and we need to know everything about the other countries. And
so I mean, and we have a lot of music and artists that we export, and we have a lot of success with our artists abroad. And I mean, that's also down to this, like my third bullet here. We always have to be active. It's like the worst thing that you could reply, like if your buddy shows up, sees you on the street, and he was like, "Hey, how's it going?" and you would be like, "Oh, not good, man. I've got nothing to do. I'm literally just spending time doing nothing." That's the worst answer you can have in Iceland, because you always have to say, yeah, I got so much on my plate. I'm drowning. I have to do more than you. So it kind of spurs us on. So if you're not doing anything in sports, then you should be doing something in music or writing a novel or something like that. It's like. So it's just an endless circle. So some would call it a vicious circle, but I think it actually brings out the best of us, and which actually prepares us for that. We love to fight against the odds, and we're always the best, but only per capita. We always want to compare per capita. But we are not megalomaniacs, and we do realize that we are a tiny member on the global village. But people either don't know or have forgotten that the Vikings were travelers and explorers. So there's an old saying in Viking literature is that in English it translates as "stupid is the homesteader." So we really want to travel, and we try to be very respectful to other cultures, especially when they're not wasted abroad, because we have such high alcohol prices that when we get abroad, that we some of us can actually be not good exports from our side. Which brings us to the third act of our psyche, beer. And I don't know how we're on time, but as with so many things as in Iceland, we try to do everything with gusto, and we always have to be better than your neighbor. So when beer was allowed back in Iceland after prohibition from 1915 until 89, the microbrewery scene in Iceland has just exploded. And my favorite is in the top right corner, called Borg Brukhus. So there are a lot of, so they have a periodic system of beer. So like the Latin word for hops is lupus. So all of their IPAs have contained the word Ulfur, which is Icelandic for wolf. Mm. And they geek out a lot on when it comes to beer. And they had their first beer was the bottom beer, the bottom right picture, called Brio. It's a German style Pilsner. And it won, I think it was in 2010, the World Beer Cup. And it's a very good Pilsner, even though it's made from our pure and soft water, which is usually not very good for brewing Pilsners.
And would it not good for all the Icelanders when they come, let's say, to Berlin, due to the cost advantage, to find these beers then here? Because I doubt that you find Icelandic beer in Berlin, probably, isn't it?
Not in Berlin, but I've seen Icelandic beer in Europe. But we are actually exporting a lot of beer to the US. And the ironic thing is that I can buy a 6-pack of Icelandic beer in Los Angeles cheaper than in Iceland.
Wow.
And
because there's no tax on it in the US, and in Iceland it's so expensive due to the tax.
Yeah, exactly. There's no alcohol tax in the US. So it was very ridiculous to actually have a cheaper Icelandic beer in Los Angeles than in Iceland. But this picture to the bottom left is the beer spot in Hrísey. This is like a 30-minute drive from my hometown. And I mean, we copied this from the Czech Republic, but it's not bad. Kicking back in the hot tubs, which are filled with beer with a nice ocean view. So we've come a long way in 31 years after we had access to beer again, from only drinking very, Daniel, the first beer that was imported to Iceland after they opened back for beer was Löwenbräu. So Icelanders drank a lot of Löwenbräu.
Yeah, but that's not German beer, that's Bavarian beer. That's totally different.
Yeah. But there's also one fun little history nugget here for Fatima and the other Portuguese gentleman. I didn't quite catch his name. Carlos, yeah. So during Prohibition, red wine was not initially allowed in Iceland, only strong liquor. But due to Iceland exporting a lot of salted fish to Spain and Portugal didn't have the currency to pay for it. So Spain and Portugal forced Iceland to rescind the ban on red wines. So it was a swap from salted cod.
I don't know if it is a good business, because I prefer the wine.
Yeah. But so there's a saying in Icelandic from Prohibition.
Maybe you can change for hands, because I know in Iceland you don't have hands. It's true? That is true?
Sorry, that we don't have
Hands.
Yeah, we don't have hands. It's true.
You can export that.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a saying in Icelandic which is like, if you see someone pissed or drunk, then you would say, yeah, that guy looks, well, he comes Spanish. So if people were fucked up on red wine from Spain or Portugal during that time of the century. But our exports are not related to fish that so much anymore. We've progressed from being a raw material provider. We have one of the highest portion of university graduates in the world. 60% recently it was recently shown that 60% of all females in Iceland have a university degree.
It's like in Portugal.
Yeah. So we moved into IT, industrial hardware, software development, pharmaceutical, orthopedics, and obviously the airline industry. I don't know. These are all internationally renowned brands. Alvotech for pharmaceuticals, Össur in orthopedics. I was really hoping for NG to be here, because Össur, they provided Oscar Pistorius with his orthopedics when he was competing. Marel, they are huge.
But next question would be, who sold him the weapon he was using?
Now you use the orthopedics to run in front to the police.
Yeah.
Good job, I know. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, very good observation.
Spirit we like in this virtual.
So in the top right corner is CCP. They have the computer game EVE Online, which is, I don't know, 15 years old. It has a huge internet following, and it's played exclusively online. And they have EVE Online conferences here in the country. So the country basically fills once a year with computer game geeks, but it's very funny, and they are a very lovable bunch. But that's it, and I hopefully we have some questions. And
yeah, absolutely. You know, I was, due to an Icelandic issue, a hostage. 2010. I was a hostage, and I needed, I think it was 32 hours at the end. And at the end, I was even losing for a month my driving license. And I was somehow expecting that you will mention also the strange name of this volcano, and because we have a lot of aviation people here.
Yes.
And for a long period, aircraft couldn't fly in Europe. So maybe you want to mention this also.
Yeah, I mean Eyjafjallajökull, but it wasn't such a big deal for us.
How pronounced again?
Eyjafjallajökull, Island Mountain Glacier.
Yeah, but
We call here the fucking Vulcan from Iceland.
Yeah. Or in America, it was always called E15 because it started with an E and was 15 letters.
Oh, that's
It was
cool.
very strange name, very complicated. That's true. But it was a big, huge impact here.
And I remember this nice rhyme which was saying, "What we wanted from Iceland was cash. What we got was ash."
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But the funny part is that Iceland Air actually kept on operating.
How come?
They moved their hub up north to the northern part of Iceland. So Iceland Air was able to keep up operations because they moved their hub to up north Iceland and also to Glasgow. So they were doing connecting passengers in Glasgow and in a small town on the northern coast, which is called Akureyri. And so yeah, it was actually an example in crisis management, and was often taught in universities in the years after Eyjafjallajökull. But I have to do a little bit of marketing for my hometown, because my hometown was ranked, I think it was Time Magazine or TripAdvisor. It was ranked as one of the top 20 winter destinations in the world. So I have a final picture here from the little harbor in my hometown, and I don't know if you can see my cursor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the most popular backcountry skiing mountain top in northern Iceland, and if we go back to the top in the presentation, this is me standing there.
Wow. Oh.
And it's also the scene of a TV show called Trapped, which has been showed in the UK, Germany, all over Scandinavia, Japan. I don't know if it made it to, I think it was shown on CDF in Germany, and it got good ratings.
So, it's all about logistics, and that would be now my next question. You have only a few of footballers. You are a small country, but you will soon have 3 airlines. You have Iceland Air, legacy carrier. You will have Play Air, and then revamped Wow Air. How come that such a small country has 3 airlines, whereas Germany has only 1 airline?
Because I would say this is first, the rebranded Wow Air. I'm not sure they will actually do and conduct operations from Iceland. But then you have to remember that us Icelanders, we are people of optimism. So
sorry to correct me, of course, we have more airlines. I don't want to mention now the smaller ones. We have, of course, 3, 4 airlines, but for the size of the country, it's pretty ambitious that 3 airlines now want to compete for this Iceland, US, Iceland, Europe traffic. And so what's your sense on this? Who will make this race?
The thing is that Iceland is exactly on a GCD course from Northern Europe to North America. So that's why it is a brilliant stopover point to conduct Europe to North America on a narrow body. And that's been the key aspect of Iceland Air operations and then WOW Airs. And it will be the key factor for Play. I can see Play grow and coexist with Iceland Air in some capacity. But I think that both actually are going to struggle in 3 to 5 years' time when the XLR will come to the market. Because then European operators and North American operators will go straight over the pond on a narrow body. instead of a wide body. So I think we will have 2 airlines, but the Icelandic market usually during summertime is serviced by 30 airlines. And last year, 2019, we had 2.4 million tourists, I believe, which is like 8 times the amount of the population, which is insane.
And so expensive. Imagine if it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. I mean, to go there for vacation, at least for the Southern Europe people. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
Christine, do you have a question to Aina about Iceland?
I have no questions about Iceland, but you're giving me lots of ideas to what to add into the Canada presentation. But I do have a comment to make about the volcano.
Yeah.
So we haven't met before, but I used to live there, Canada, and my first 6-7 years I was with the maintenance branch, and then I went over to the air operator. And one of the first things I had to do was add in a policy about how to handle volcanic ash and inspections that had to be done after that. So that was a very interesting education for me. I never thought as an airline I would be learning about volcanic ash.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You should talk to Rory from Rolls-Royce. He is the industry authority on volcanic ash.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he is a brilliant individual. He's a very fun and just amazing lecturer. So he is like the industry authority when it comes to volcanic ash and engines. So if you need anything from him, look up Rory from Rolls-Royce.
I've written it down.
So Carlos, just to let you know, on 2nd July is the Portugal presentation. Carlos, are you still there? Fatima,
Yes.
are you still there?
Yes, yes. Okay.
I am, yes.
But we cannot see you. You have switched off camera, or you have no electricity in Portugal
Sorry,
anymore.
no, you have.
Ah, okay.
Here I am.
Who is the
Everybody was with the camera off, so I did the same.
Because Fatima is going to make the Portugal presentation. Carlos, you wanted to know who is doing the Portugal presentation.
No, I want to see, of course. Maybe we have different points of view from the same country.
And
Well, maybe we can do it together.
Fatima,
Yeah.
there's one word which is not allowed in this presentation. It starts with an R and ends with an O. I don't want to hear this name, huh?
Okay.
Renault?
Ronaldo.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, but we have here much more Ronaldos. We can use another name.
Good, very good.
No, we can have a different approach. I'm not going to do that approach.
I want to see the presentation from Fatima, and I give my commenters.
Okay. Well, be gentle.
No, I
Always.
always.
Yeah.
And of course, in the Canada presentation, we will hear a lot about hockey and all the other nice things from Canada. So you
Maple
see,
syrup.
it's easy peasy, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And of course, we can say enough things about our countries because there are so many things to tell. So we have really to be, filter everything. So it's not easy.
Exactly.
In my case,
But then we have a second chance for phase 2 for another time, I think.
And I will also put you the address of our upcoming official event for some more business talk, which is the Ops 2020, will be a virtual event.
Okay.
Christine already agreed to be panelist on that. Maybe Carlos also wants to talk about it.
I do it. But Anna, it's because that Daniel asked it, why you have 3 or 4 airline companies? It's business, man. It's business.
Yeah, it's business.
It's business. It's the time, Daniel, to go to Iceland to sell your majestic and great system.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you. Can you say
Waxfell
in Portuguese, please, for the Brazilian market?
I can help you. You know me.
But I just read that TAP is going to fly to the US soon.
Not yet. We start in July with all aircraft from Portugalia, the 11 aircrafts, Europe and Cabo Verde and the Icelands, Açores e Madeira, and Brazil with long range and maybe Africa, Mozambique and Angola. We try.
And Brazil, flying to Brazil is not too dangerous at the moment.
I don't know. Maybe the danger is Bolsonaro, not the country. I don't know. No, but we try we still continue with the flights to São Paulo, 2 to São Paulo, 1 from Rio, because we have lots of Brazilians here. We start the operation slowly, of course. But you know, Portugal now is it was the first country to receive a stamp from the travel safe in Europe. Maybe time to the German guys and the Iceland guys to come to Portugal.
But was there not now a second wave, kind of? Was this not the case?
No, the numbers, they grow only in Lisbon, because maybe is around Lisbon, not the Lisbon city, you know. But today we have only 1 dead, and I think is control. The youngest, they start to go out, you know, the Portuguese guys, and the age is between 20, 30, and I think it is control. Now is everything control.
Last Friday, Fatima, I think you were telling us that you were planning to go out with your father for the weekend.
Yes, and I said I didn't go. Yeah, and I didn't go because I was a little bit afraid of the impact. It has been increasing in Lisbon and surroundings. So that's the truth, not the rest of the country. The rest of the country is COVID-free, and Lisbon and surrounding, it has a step back from last week, and now it's starting again to be controlled. So today there was less people and only 1 death in a person. So we only got at 1. But in fact, it's true. I mean, Lisbon was the region that got, step back from everything.
I think it's a problem around Lisbon in the industry. The workers, they travel Lisbon to Almada and the cities around Lisbon, but I think it's
Lisbon.
Always is controlled, this process,
but it's not controlled. Now it's controlled. So it was during 1 week. We don't know why it happened, because and most of the people that were contaminated were from 20 to 40 years old. So it was the opposite, not the eldest, but the youngest.
Yeah. I was out
some things like this.
The last weekend, and in the not the hotel, but the open. Como é que Julita? No. And this 2 days I was in the south of Lisbon in an hotel in Sesimbra. Everything is controlled, and the people starting to go to the places. Of course, you need to have some I don't know, some cuidados, some.
They are being careful. Yeah, they are being more careful because people are. They were.
Here, the process in Portugal is cool. I think it's cool, and the hospitals, they are all the time controlled with not with the full process. I think it's controlled.
I have a question for Fatima and for Carlos. Who from you is for Benfica Lisbon and who is for Sporting Lisbon?
I'm not going to tell you.
I am of course, you know me, always with the great teams, with you and the Benfica, of course.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the little presentation.
Yeah, thank you,
and
we really
hope great. Thank you, Einar.
Welcome you in Iceland.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah,
thank
likewise.
you. Nice to see you, Daniel.
Thank you.
We open our country on Monday.
I will upload the recording in Facebook, So hopefully you all join also the Facebook group, because there you see the entire recording.
Yeah.
In LinkedIn, only 10 minutes, because LinkedIn only allows 10 minutes.
Yes.
It was
Very,
fun.
very professional as always, Daniel.
Take care, guys. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
great weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.